Immigration to Canada is the process by which people migrate to Canada to reside permanently in the country. For several years now, Canada has been accepting about 250,000 new permanent residents every year. For people with skills, work experience, and good standard of English or French, qualifying for residence is not a huge barrier. But immigration is becoming harder and harder day by day. In nutshell, we need people, but lots of hidden clause, continuous changing in rules, creating a confusion and frustration among people from every category. Student visa holders, work visa holders, educated PRs, PRs seeking citizenship, family class spousal visas, visitor visas, poof, you name it. Problem and confusion is everywhere. No one is happy at their end. Today I have got an opportunity to talk to the person and to get the first-hand information that what exactly is going in immigration in Canada. I got your tons of inbox messages and your text, and I will assure you to get all one by one with Deputy Prime Minister and Citizenship and Immigration Minister of Canada, Honorable Jason Kenney, my guest today. Welcome, Minister.
Pleasure, thank you.
Minister, how do you feel being a part of the most interesting, most confusing, the most vague department of federal government when people expect a lot, but you have to limit or quota everywhere?
Well, it's a fascinating challenge. I feel honored to be responsible for what is perhaps the most important ministry in the federal government because it's all about our future. It's about maintaining what is the largest immigration program in the world in relative terms. And it's about making sure that we keep fair rules and attract those people who are going to help us build a more prosperous Canada. So it has its challenges and its frustrations, but it's also it's a hugely interesting portfolio where you deal with real people and their lives.
What is the 13-year timeline in family class? Federal Liberals bashed a lot as it was their campaign tool, but what exactly is this? Will it take 13 years to bring my parents in Canada now on?
No. What the Liberals did when they were in power was to neglect Canada's immigration system through incompetence and mismanagement. In fact, when they were removed from office in 2006, they left behind a backlog of almost 1 million people with applications in our immigration system, including 110,000 parents and grandparents waiting for their family sponsorship applications. So when we came to office, we inherited those huge backlogs and long processing times. In fact, it was taking 64 months when we came to office for parents and grandparents' applications to be processed. We took action. We've managed to reduce some of the backlogs, such as for skilled workers, and we've managed to reduce processing times somewhat, including for parents and grandparents, down to 58 months on average. What we announced in the campaign is that our government will develop an action plan for faster family sponsorship after consulting with immigrant communities and experts. We're going to see how can we reduce the backlog of applicants so we can speed up the processing time. I don't want people waiting for years for their family members to come in the country.
Talking about Liberals, how did you manage to change ethnic vote bank in favor of Conservatives from Liberals?
Well, you know, it used to be that most new Canadians voted Liberal for no particularly good reason. It was just a habit, and the Liberals did a good job of reaching out to new Canadians and cultural communities and developing relationships. Conservatives didn't used to be as good at that. But the main thing we did was very simply to encourage new Canadians and members of cultural communities to vote for their values. The basic insight that Stephen Harper and I had was that most new Canadians are basically conservative in their values, in the way they live their lives, with a tremendous work ethic, with a sense of entrepreneurship, that so many small businesses get started by new Canadians, with a opposition to high taxes and burdensome government regulation, with support, deep support for the family as the basic institution of society, deserving the respect and support of government rather than the hostility of government. Respect for tradition, respect for religious faith, respect for law and order. These are basic conservative values, and so our insight was we just need new Canadians to vote in accordance with their values. If they do so, they're more likely to vote conservative than not, and indeed in the May election we appear to have won the support of new Canadians with about a 20 percentage point plurality over the Liberals. And we won most of the constituencies in Canada, a majority of whose residents are immigrants to Canada.
Minister, while talking about parents, some of our elderly parents don't want to stay permanently in Canada, but want to visit us. But when we apply them for a visit, mostly visitor visas are denied. Why so? Why don't we a little lenient and give them 5 or 10 years multi-entry visas to stop the hassle again and again?
Well, first of all, I actually have directed our officials, our visa officers, to grant multiple entry visas for as long as possible to parents, to people who have an application for parental sponsorship, wherever possible. But people still have to go through the visa application process. They still have to prove to the visa officer, according to our law, that they are likely to go back to their country of origin. And so we cannot guarantee 100% acceptance. Now, I can tell you that the vast majority of visitor visa applications by people with a parental sponsorship application in our system are approved. The significant majority are. I think it's about 2/3. I'm sorry for the other 1/3 that do get disappointed. And I made a commitment in the election that I would look at alternate approaches to our visitor visa system, and I'm willing to take a fresh look at something like a bond system to guarantee someone's return, and perhaps other approaches. We can never guarantee all people will get the visa, but we want people who intend to respect Canada's immigration laws to be able to come to Canada.
Minister, according to new rules on spousal cases, people will be eligible for permanent residence after 2 years stay in Canada with their spouse. Then they'll be called for an interview for permanent PR. Don't you think that it will be an extra burden on immigration? Especially nowadays when visitor visas are 4 to 5 months behind. How can you assure that 2-year time period won't be 3, 4 or 5 years? And it won't be due to your intentions, but due to backlogs?
Yes, good question. Well, first of all, I was contacted a couple of years ago by some of the thousands of victims of immigration marriage fraud, of marriages of convenience, people whose hearts had been broken and often whose finances had been destroyed by people they married from overseas, where the marriage was just a means of getting to Canada rather than starting a new life with their Canadian spouse. And so I held public consultations. Thousands and thousands of people participated online. They wrote in with their suggestions. We had town hall meetings across the country, and almost everyone in those consultations said that we should do the same thing as United Kingdom, United States, Australia, New Zealand, and bring in some form of conditional status for sponsored foreign spouses for their initial period of residency in Canada. So the rule in the future will be that a sponsored foreign spouse will not be guaranteed permanent residency until they've been here for 2 years. And if in that period the Canadian sponsoring spouse says, no, this person never came and lived with me, they showed up at the airport, they took off, they never intended the marriage, then we'll look at the case closely. And if it's proven that the foreigner was exploiting the Canadian, then we will not process their permanent residency. As to your second question, it will not take, it'll be automatic. If there is no report against the foreign sponsored spouse, they will automatically get their permanent residency. So there won't be any delays in all of that. I should finally point out that the foreign sponsored spouse will have a 5-year bar on being able to divorce, and turn around and sponsor someone else in the country. We all know so well the cases. Someone comes, divorce, marries someone else for money, divorce, marry someone else. We're going to stop it. It's over. We're sending a message to those who break hearts and our laws. You should not come to Canada if that's your intention.
What is the timeline of getting citizenship these days? People are in line after applying for citizenship over 2 years. Any major changes happening?
Yes, I tasked my department with speeding up the processing time for citizenship. It does take too long. I make no excuses for that. The reason is just this, that we have so many people applying. Canada has the highest percentage of immigrants who go on to become citizens of any country in the developed world. About 85% of our immigrants go on to become citizens. And because our government has increased immigration levels, there are just that many more people applying for citizenship. In fact, since our government took office in 2006, we have sworn in about 1 million new Canadian citizens. Imagine, that's like adding the entire province of Saskatchewan or Manitoba into the Federation in terms of new citizens. We're proud of that, but it's just the numbers, it's the sheer volume. We ask people to be patient, and I'm encouraging my department to think more like a business. How can we provide better service, perhaps charging people a little bit extra to go faster in the system, hire more staff? We're looking at management and operational changes to reduce the waiting times and speed up the processing.
Minister, some rules and timelines are very illogical and don't make sense. Like if you have to extend your visitor visa, it takes almost 6 months, and it takes longer to extend your work permit with the same employer instead of new one. And it takes 15 months to renew in-home caregiver visa. Why it's like that?
You know, the answer for all of these questions about long processing times is again, it's very simply a question of the volume, the numbers, the huge numbers. So, for example, we've seen the number of nannies, live-in caregivers, coming to Canada more than double in the past 6 years. Many of them are coming out of Philippines. Manila's become our busiest immigration office in the world. 32,000 permanent residents a year being put through that office. And it's just difficult for us to do everything all at once. The good news is this. Canada is welcoming more immigrants than ever before. Our government has on average welcomed 254,000 new permanent residents per year. We are welcoming the equivalent of 0.8% of our population as immigrants, meaning that we have the highest relative level of immigration in the developed world. Last year, we welcomed 281,000 permanent residents, the highest level in 6 decades. And so the volumes are just so huge. It's hard to keep up with the many applications that we get. We recognize, though, that it's not fair to have people waiting for years, which is why, for example, we implemented our action plan for faster immigration in the skilled worker category, because when the Liberals left office, they left behind a backlog of over 500,000, taking 7 years to process. Here's the good news. We've managed to cut that backlog by a quarter, and now new applicants in that skilled worker program are getting an answer in less than a year rather than more than 6 years. This is a model that I would like to apply to the various other programs, including caregivers, parents, and others, to speed up the processing times by limiting the number of incoming applications that we have to process. I'm sorry that's a technical answer, but I want to give you the real facts.